So the nature of this talk is called Irrational Evolution. And just to give a little bit of a backstory on that, I'm going to let somebody who can explain how art and the irrational mind is a little bit more important than we may be giving it credit for. Somebody who can explain it far better than myself.
The precondition for creativity is, I think, disequilibrium, what mathematicians now call chaos. Over very large spans of time, we can say that creativity is conserved, that the universe becomes more creative, and out of that state of creative fecundity, more creativity is manifest. So that from that point of view, the universe is almost what we would have to call an art-making machine. We have been disempowered by a rational tendency to deny our irrational roots, which are a kind of embarrassment to science, because science is the special province of the ego, and magic and art are the special province of something else. I could name it, but I won't. It prefers to be unnamed, I think. I think that, you know, to whatever degree art over the past several centuries has wandered in the desert, it is because this shamanic function has been either suppressed or forgotten. This notion of the artist as mystical journeyer, as one who goes into a world unseen by others and then returns to tell them of it, this really is the bridge back to the archaic shamanic function of the artist. Permission to explore the irrational.
Permission to explore the irrational is right, Terence McKenna. Thank you for that. By the way, it's 2:22 up here. That was Terence McKenna, for those of you who are not familiar with his work. Rest in peace. He was one of the greatest thinkers of our time, and he really explored what shamanism today truly is, because it's far different than what shamanism was a few thousand years ago. Today, it's more or less what you'll find is neo-shamanism, which is people that have only been into the plants and into how the consciousness expands by using the plants for only 5 years or so, or have done a workshop and call themselves a shaman. So he was one of the great patriarchs that actually showed the connection between what the shamans of old are, or were, and what the artists of today are, and the link between the two. And he actually says that that thin line that connects the old world with the new, it's an even thinner line between the shamans of old and their existence still in the world today. And it doesn't just have to do with, you know, them living in Peru and Brazil and down in the Amazon, or out in Africa or out in Australia. It has to do with the artists. Any one of us could be born with that artistic link, and actually every single one of us are. Only a few of us give ourselves permission to be that artistic. So that's why the main core of what I'm going to be speaking about today is the importance of art in culture. Because art is a part of every single one of our lives. However, sometimes we forget to see the relevance between art and being able to explore, or in this sense, to free your mind. Because the artist does not stick within the confines of the rational mind, rational thinking. What the artist does is the artist breaks those boundaries down and embraces the infinite, which is a very scary realm for a lot of people to go into. And anyone who has explored shamanism recognizes that it's not all peaches and cream and roses. It's quite interesting to actually get to the root of who we are, because there's a lot of things that we are denying about ourselves. And these things that we are denying about ourselves in our very own psyche are the things that are keeping us from being able to free our mind and to accept some of the things that you'll be hearing in this weekend. We have some great speakers that are going to be talking about some pretty interesting and far out there things, but they're only far out there based upon the rationale that we've set up between the moment that we've been born and now. So I'm not sure if Freeman is here, but if you guys haven't heard Freeman fly or any of his work, talk about far out and talk about well-researched. So there's my little plug for my friend there. And shamanism. Again, the shamans of the old, and I'll get into a little bit of why they dress the way they do. There's always something adorning the head, there's something connecting the feet, and there's always instruments in their hands. And there's those three connections there. But to give the words to somebody else here, this is Alan Moore. He's a writer. Some of you may know some of his work. I believe The Watchmen is probably my favorite of his work. But he says, art, like magic, is the science of manipulating symbols, words, or images to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language about magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. Indeed, to cast a spell, it is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or a writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you would likely see to a shaman. And he actually makes a statement in this writing, in this article that he did. He goes on to make a statement that some of the most profound shamans today are in Hollywood making advertisements for people everywhere else around the world. Talk about shamanism and changing people's minds and changing people's perceptions on what they should put inside their body, what they should be driving, how they should dress, how they should act to other people, what sex means in culture, what all of these things that should just be brought down from, you know, our family line and our local culture, the people that actually know us and give a shit about us, instead of being done from Hollywood or being done from somewhere else and advertisers that have a reason to be telling you what they're telling you. But the shamans of today actually used to, or I'm sorry, the shamans of old actually used to cover everything that you'll see up here. Every single one of these characters was embodied by the shaman in their own culture, if you go back several thousand years. Now, today, all of our politicians are bobbleheads. Yes, yes sir, thank you sir, I will take that endorsement, I will take those packs and that soft money, and I will say whatever you need me to say so I can keep this cushy job and I can have that retirement. Our scientists today, that's also what a shaman was. A shaman understands that magic, art, all of those things have a science to them, and they understood the science. But they didn't compartmentalize it and say, I'm going to use the science here, and then completely separate the school of thought into, let's say, the warrior. Because the shaman was a warrior, as opposed to popular belief. Yes, there was much more of a spiritual connectedness thousands of years ago when we're talking about the true roots of shamanism, but they also had war, and there was a deeper psychological meaning to war. Now the shamans would make more of a point, the same way that the coyote, the trickster in mythology, they would ride backwards into battle on horseback, naked, blindfolded. That's actually what they would do, and obviously that wasn't it's not a tactic that the US would be using. But they would do that to prove a point. Their life was an artistic point that they were proving. And then you have the teacher. And I'm sorry, ladies, I tried to find more depictions of, you know, ladies, you know, at high positions in culture, but apparently we're in a male-dominated society. I didn't understand that. The teacher, yes. The shaman, and I was just talking to somebody about that word, teach. What the shaman would do is they would share instead of teach, but what they would do is they would share their experience and show that you know just as much. The actual root of the word educate is not to shove information inside the child's mind. Educare, it's to induce, to bring out of, to draw forth the natural intelligence of our children. But that's not what we do today. Today in our educational system, it's not education, it's indoctrination. It's saying, these are the things you're going to learn about Christopher Columbus and blah, 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 and next week we're going to have a test and I want you to regurgitate exactly what I told you. That's not what children do, that's what computers do. Data in, data out, upon command. Children being trained to be computers today. That's not how it was thousands of years ago. Or even a few hundred years ago. The shamans were also the judges. People would bring these disputes that they couldn't settle among themselves to the elder or the shamans of the tribe. And the shamans would through their wisdom and their compassion, recognize that there is some truth within both sides and come to find the best means to resolve the issue. The doctor. Obviously, we know that the shaman was also a doctor. And then we have the priest. Okay? Back then, there is a religion, and all religion is religare, is the union with reality, or union with God, which their beliefs is God is reality, the same as Buddha, and yoga, the word yoga meaning union with that one divine reality. That's all the shaman ever would try to do, was to show you your own divinity, to show you your own truth. Whatever words you want to place on it, that's what the shaman was there for. So the shaman today, typically what you'll find is a lot of white people, which isn't a problem, but white people claiming that their roots are all the way back to original shamanism. That's not shamanism, that's art. And that's beautiful because that's what shamanism has turned into today. But what you find most today is neo-shamanism. It's new shamanism. And obviously I haven't met them all, and there are some incredible ones out there, but I say this because I have met quite a few down in Peru even, ones that say they've been there for, their family line has been there for several thousand years, and they are not following the heart, which is what any shaman would tell you. If you're not following the heart, that's not a doctrine that any religion would stand up to.
His brand of yoga, called dynamic meditation, is a new age combination of Hinduism and psychotherapies. This exercise, involving rigorous breathing and hyperventilation, is designed to arouse the serpent force called Kundalini, which the gurus believe lies coiled at the base of the spine.
More. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
Some people's experience ought to, in my opinion, be done in private, but evidently, God doesn't do it that way.
Bob and Sherry Lindauer have been attending the vineyard since it began 17 years ago.
And it's just wonderful how they've brought us up, they've trained us on the biblical foundation of laying hands on the sick, praying for the sick.
Sometimes people will shake under the power that we're...
He wants everyone. There's not much more time. He aches and he grieves.
Sometimes people will cry. Sometimes people will laugh. Sometimes people will be slain or go out under the power.
And even bizarre things can happen.
To see an unseen hand coming in the crowd and touching people. The unseen hand of the Lord is touching people.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Rajneesh says his goal is to create a new man, one who is happily mindless.
No.
Now, I wanted to show that for a specific reason. The first time I'd seen that video, it really creeped me out. The way people were acting, completely out of control. It almost seems like demonic possession in some way. But the reason why I wanted to show that is because the more I watched that, and the more I started going through my own experiences, a lot of the times feeling like I was not in control of my body and something was trying to speak through me, what I began to recognize was all the words that I would place on it as being some creepy demonic experience. I began to realize that culture sets up a sort of boundary around us, and we allow these walls and these definitions of who we are to turn into some type of identity. And then when we become that identity so much and it conflicts with who we actually are, what starts to happen? Let's say you have a hose that can only take 50 psi, and you have 50 psi in that hose, and you drop it on the ground and you damage the structural integrity of that hose. What's going to happen? Exactly. Uncontrollably, that fluid or whatever is in there is going to come out. There's a reason for guidelines and structure and rigidity. It gives direction to us. However, when that direction or when those guidelines were given to us and it doesn't fit who we actually are, then we're going to have a moment like that. And I remember the first few people that I showed that video, they were like, that looks demonic. That looks absolutely demonic. However, have you ever seen children running out on the playground after having to sit still for 5 hours listening to somebody up here in a two-dimensional platform saying blah, 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 Christopher Columbus did this, 2 + 5, blah, 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 test next week. And then what happens when you set those kids out on the playground? Do they act goofy and wild and roll around on the ground and scream? Yeah. That's because it's not necessarily natural what's happening in school, nor is it natural what's happening in our society. Now, so we're not pointing the fingers and saying, these are the people who are doing it to us. Let's make very sure, or let's be very clear about this. It's us who allows for that identity to build itself, and I think for a very good purpose. The reason why the first half of our life that leads up to a spiritual awakening, the reason why the first half of our life leads us down the wrong road is so we can find our own way back. And that's why we have a lot of these issues in our lives. It's not because they're negative and I wish I would not have had that. Those are the people who try to bury their past in the backyard. Whereas I say any clear-headed person would say, bring your past with you. Turn it into something that tells your story. Use it as an experience. You don't have to be ashamed, and I'll get into the shame part of it. You don't have to be ashamed of the mistakes that you made. That's what we tell children all the time. Don't be ashamed of your mistakes. Just don't do it again. Because if you do it again, that means you weren't paying attention. And that's the point of a book or a movie, is you pay attention to it. If you miss what's going on, that's because you probably weren't paying attention at one point. So make mistakes, make a lot of them, but pay attention while it's happening. That's how you truly live. And I wanted to put this up here, shaking medicine. Most people that I've talked to all around the world, when I ask them what happened leading up to their spiritual awakening, or whether it's a psychological awakening or a mind opening, whatever you want to call it, what happened leading up to it and what was going on in that moment? Can anyone tell me what the #1 activity that people were doing was that led to a spiritual awakening?
Dancing. Gardening.
Dancing. Well, you say gardening? That's awesome. Thank you for that. Dancing. I mean, and believe me, it can happen anyway. It can happen seated in meditation. But dancing. And I'll get into why, specifically. Shamans use tremors and shaking the body to not just activate the energy field around them, but we have energy flowing through us that gets dammed up and blocked throughout our body. And when that energy can't flow the way it naturally is supposed to flow, it's like snipping a wire in a computer. Energy is not going to be getting to a very crucial part of that computer. So what the number one thing that and I felt this with me, whenever I feel great and I'm in my room and dancing around to my music, I feel high without having to touch anything. And that's what the shamans understood, was by simply tremoring, and the last book that I showed you was actually Shaking Medicine. The book Shaking Medicine was just something that somebody had recognized Native Americans have been doing, shamans have been doing, and also the sages and the alchemists and the gurus. It's even a Qigong practice, slapping yourself just to get energy moving in your body, tapping the vital organs, and just feeling your body, getting to know the fact that most of the time you're not thinking of your body, so you're not thinking of how much tension you're holding and how much energy you're blocking. You can't see it too well, but these are energy meridians through the body. And that's pretty much exactly what I was speaking about. There are 12 major meridians, but there are many meridians. And if you give attention to your body, this is why massage is good. This is why any type of attention with your body, stretching, yoga, exercise, jogging, going on an elliptical machine, dancing around in your, in your room, whatever it may be, just getting that energy going, things like that allow your mind to better connect with your body, which is the beginning of any spiritual awakening. And the reason why I want to show this real quick, you can't see it here, those two dots to the side are actually a foot and a hand. And that's the bubbling well, the K1 kidney point in acupressure. We know that reflexology, there's points on our feet that draw in the energy from the earth. There's a point on our head that draws in the cosmic energy. And there's points on our hands, just like the stigmata. Nails through the feet, nails through the hands, and a crown on the head. The three pathways to which we receive our energy and also express our energy. But and I'll get into this a little bit if I have time, but the reason why he's nailed to the cross is because that's symbolic. It's not just showing the fact that he died on a wooden cross. It's symbolic. The vertical line is the masculine. The horizontal line is the feminine. And where they cross, that's the force of sex. That's the Trinity. Masculine, feminine, and how they unite, how they create the creation of the next generation. And symbols, I'll just give one more symbol. If on a two-dimensional surface you had to show a cross spinning because of sexual excitation, what would that cross look like? It's another symbol, very well known. It was bastardized in the past 100 years. The swastika. That's an inflamed cross that's spinning. Okay? Now, the direction that it's spinning also has to do with the symbolism. But all I'm simply showing is that we have that energy within us, and the sexual force, that sexual energy, is the number one thing that becomes damned, and the number one thing that turns, in a sense, a toxin within our system. So if you see abstinence without actually using that energy and turning that transmuting our sexual energy, turns into what you see in the Catholic or any type of church where you see a lot of sexual abuse because they're told you must be abstinent. You can't just store that energy. Energy needs to move. It needs to do something. Okay? And that's why there are practices where you actually use that energy and transmute it into something that is actually under your will, not under the will of the animal that you were born into this body with. But we all have energy systems. This is the energy system, the meridian system of a horse. Dogs have meridian systems. Godzilla has a meridian system. So what would the root of all illness be? The root of all physical illness and psychological, blocked energy. Energy that is not moving. If you look, there's representations all through nature. Moving water, flowing water, breeds health, okay? It breeds healthy agents of order, okay? But when you see stagnant water that's been stagnant for a while, it breeds agents of chaos. Now, neither of these are good nor bad. They just are what they are. Stagnant water, it breeds agents of chaos like viruses, parasites, bacteria, fungi, whatever it may be. But those are also very important because they're messengers of nature, showing that energy isn't moving here. You're sick. So when we're sick and we say, oh, my immune system is down, I'm just going to blame it because the immune system is down, or I touched a doorknob without washing my hands 15 times afterwards. That's not the point of it. When you're sick, that was your immune system also allowing you to become sick because it can no longer keep you from recognizing that not recognizing that there's energy dammed up in your body somewhere. You should thank your illnesses because they're showing you that you're not paying attention to a specific part of the body. And here's another representation of it. Here's the circuit breaker, and here's the house. All the lights are on in the house. That's because the energy is flowing and working well, just like when you're born. However, say 30 years you've been living on this planet, and a few of the systems are shutting down. I have a kidney problem, I have a liver problem, I have this, that, and the other, I have back pain. I have like a hunchback because, I'm not sure why. Well, most of those problems radiate from the gut, and they radiate from the center from which all of our energy comes from. And in the Dantian, which is this energy center right behind the navel, that's where all of our energy comes from. And when it's not getting to a part in the body, we'll say, oh, that's just because I have a bad back. No, it's because you're deficient in one of your organs. Oh man, I'm stiff and I always have this weird, tingling in my arm. It's because you're deficient. It's because your organs are not keeping you healthy because you haven't been paying enough attention to it. Who controls the circuit box? It's not the central nervous system. It's our higher intelligence that recognizes that if it were to turn all of the energy back on, then you would have to deal with all of the repressed emotions that are built up as tension and charges within your body. And your higher intelligence knows that you can't deal with all of that at once. That's why when you see a child falling off their bike at the age of 5, and they look around, and they're crying and they're screaming, but their mom is inside doing laundry or something, can't hear him. Brother and sister are on the other side of the house, can't hear him, and he's crying, and he's looking around, he's in pain, he's never dealt with something like this before, and he thinks, I've been abandoned. At my lowest point, I'm in pain, and nobody's here for me, nobody hears me crying. It doesn't have to be rational. But 30 years later, if that led to a trauma that he stored in his gut somewhere, 30 years later, it doesn't matter how irrational it is, it's something where the energy has been shut off, and you can have 45-year-old people on the couch talking to a psychiatrist like, I'm pretty sure it was when I fell off my bike when I was younger, and the psychiatrist would be like, are you serious? No, you're thinking of like having sex with your mom and then murdering her. That doesn't come from falling off of a bike. But it doesn't have to be rational. It does not have to be rational, because the child isn't rational. When something happens to a child, like let's say sexual molestation, to the child, it's their fault, because the whole world revolves around them and their mind. So it's their fault. I did something wrong. So we need to recognize that the irrational side of us, we need to explore also to become healthy. And just to quickly move through some of these, this is the nervous system that actually exists in our gut. It is not controlled by our brain. It's called the enteric nervous system. And it stores emotional charges in our gut. And so when we stop breathing abdominally and we start being much more shallow with our breathing, and we notice a lot more tension and our body's a little bit more rigid and we're not able to move fluidly like we used to, that's because there's a deficiency in our gut. And the number one way to start getting the energy to go back to your guts is just to breathe naturally. Just one natural breath is more detoxifying than any detox drink out there. One real natural breath is more energizing than any energy drink that you can take. Because what it's doing is that flow of energy that goes through our meridian system, it uses the breath to get there. And when you breathe naturally, you're massaging your entire visceral section. You're massaging that with the breath, and that is how you are actually bringing more attention to the gut. Okay? This, our stomachs, our organs, and their deficiencies is the root cause of almost any issue that came about on its own. If you're ill for any other reason, I'm not saying like if you've been hit by a car and you have an issue, I'm saying if an issue came about, it's probably because it starts in a deficiency in the gut, and it will radiate. So you're not going to feel it here because that's the point. You have an emotional charge that your higher intelligence doesn't want you to explore yet because you can't handle that type of truth. So what does it do? It radiates the pain somewhere else. Because if you have a deficiency here and you're not breathing into it, the rest of your body is going to have to work overtime to overcompensate for the fact that you're not using those muscles and they're atrophying. So bad back is probably in the gut. Problems with your legs, it's probably in the gut. Migraine, cancer, viruses, parasites, just natural illness in any way, it's probably because of deficiency in the gut. And that's what this is showing. These organs, whether you can read it or not, they show that there are emotional charges that actually lodge themselves in our internal organs. This is a lot of Chinese medicine, and I'm not going to get into it, but emotional charges like anger and frustration get stored in the liver. So you'll see a lot of people that have emotional problems, such as anger and frustration, drinking it away because they don't want to feel what that thing has to offer anymore. And these are all examples. All of the internal organs have to do with our ability to truly, fully experience our life. Because when we're not experiencing the pain that these ones have to offer, we're also not experiencing the pleasure. So when you're not feeling an entire section of your life, like joy or satisfaction in some way, that leads to an irrational thought within you that you don't have the right to live, you don't have the right to feel those feelings. And that leads to a whole slew of psychological problems. But the number one stagnant energy that becomes a problem, and it doesn't just show itself in the individuals, it shows itself, it has to be big. It has to show how big it actually is. So it does it culturally. It does it through the nations. It does it through war, major catastrophes, major events in our world. Happens when we are not thinking openly, when we are not allowing for our energy to allow us to accept that there may be more to the world that we're not accepting. So if we have closed in our mind inside of a box and we're not thinking outside that box at all because it's more comfortable inside the box, it's more comfortable to believe that 9/11 wasn't a conspiracy. Because then there's no energy that you have to put into it. You just keep going down the road that you're already on. Whether it is or it isn't. Let's say if you are 100% into conspiracies, consider that maybe some of the ones that you wholeheartedly believed in might just be BS made by somebody in the conspiracy field that is like, oh, I need to make a documentary to make a little bit of money. You know, people are expecting me to do something because this is a business, and we would be naive to think if people who really want the money wouldn't move into a business like this because the internet made conspiracy the #1 growing field all over the internet. So you have to trust your gut when it comes to these things and recognize that we know very little about how the world works. That's why we're here. We're here to experience the world, not to judge it, not to get into a routine and then just stay that way. When we get to, who is it, Peter at the gates of heaven? Is it Peter? All right. Are we going to tell him like, oh man, it was a hard ride, but I survived. You know, I got a job, I made enough money to feed myself, I made it, I survived. I mean, obviously, I'm here, so I didn't survive too long, but I did survive. It's not just about survival here. What did you do when you were here? Were you living? Were you experiencing? Did you have a dream? Did you follow it? Did you say, no, I can't follow that because what am I going to do if I don't have enough money in my bank account? Who's going to take care of me? All these questions, all the doubt keeping us from doing things that we really wish we would have just done. Like I said, all the energy drinks in the world, they don't equate to one real natural breath. All the energy drinks in the world. When these things say, this is a shamanism. Because flashy colors, ways of saying like, oh man, yeah, guarana and taurine, these things must be good. There's vitamins in it, vitamin B12 and B6. It must be really good for you. It doesn't tell you any of the other things that are on there, because for one, you can't pronounce them. And for two, if you were to actually look into the great majority of the ingredients that go into this, you wouldn't want that going inside your body. Because this doesn't lead to energy. It doesn't. Caffeine and sugar is the only thing that's really affecting you when you drink these things. It's not the guarana and the, trace elements of THC or whatever they try and put in there. Shamanism. It's great advertising. We'll put anything in our body if the advertising is right. And you have to admit, when was the last time you go into a shop and you're just looking for something to drink, and you're trying to be like, oh, I want something a little healthy. Ooh, this one says mental clarity, so I'm going to grab that one. Because it says mental clarity. We don't know anything about it. Somebody just said, this leads to mental clarity. I've done it before. That is just experimenting, trying things out. Okay? Detoxing. This does not detox you. It's sugary, it's syrupy, and your body doesn't even know what the hell to do with it. Detoxing, I'll tell you the number one, best trick to detox the body. Breathing. Breathing naturally detoxes every single one of your organs, and you don't need to pump sugar and whatever syrupy crap is inside these things. This is also another way to send your energy somewhere else. More shamanism. To relieve your problems, to get rid of all of that matter that's been sitting around in your gut for a while, I'll give you another free method that's much better than this. A natural breath clears you out much better than these things that you have to buy. You don't need milk of magnesia and magnesium and all the psyllium husk. You don't need any of those things. You're breathing and just drink a little bit of water every now and then, okay? You'll flush it out. And also, skincare products. Most people think that you need to apply all these things, which isn't living food. Mind you, this is an organ. Anything that you wouldn't smear directly on your colon or directly on your liver, try not to smear it directly on your skin because it will get in your body. Yes, this is our first line of defense, but it also absorbs everything you put on it. I've actually found that the number one thing you can put on your body for like a face cream is living, live food, like fruit, papaya, banana, avocado, living food, much better for you. And your body will thank you for not putting a lot of these chemicals on it. But I'll say another thing. Massaging the abdomen for 10 minutes a day will release more vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and skincare products into your system naturally than anything that you could apply to it. Because all of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients, they store themselves in the fascia. So when you massage it, it releases it. You don't need to buy vitamins and minerals and nutrients and skincare products and detox products and laxatives. You don't need all of those things. The medicine, as all shamans showed us, is already inside of you. Male enhancement or erectile dysfunction pills. Santa's not coming for Christmas this year. Another thing. Aside from the fact that milk makes you impotent, soy brings you joy, because there's things about soy that you may be surprised of, and there's also things about milk that you may be surprised of. Besides any of that, the point that I'm also making is not just in men, but a growing problem of impotence, not having that same drive, is because of sexual dysfunction. Sex should be an appetite, not a craving. The difference between appetite and craving is you can satisfy your appetite. Like when you're hungry and you know exactly what you want to eat and you ate just enough, you don't need any more, you're satisfied. Craving, there's no stopping it. It's like a black hole. And that is how sex, love, the expression of our love, has turned into lust, a craving that cannot be satisfied. That is why pornography is such a huge industry now. Because it's something that you can't stop. Well, now that I've seen 5 women on one guy, I want to go on to something even more. I need more of a thrill, more of a fetish. So let's throw in a goat or a cup. It sounds disgusting, but the bottom line is it's actually out there. I don't say that to make a joke. I say that to show you that this is actually how that energy, that sexual energy, will turn itself if you ignore it. It should be healthy, but most of us don't allow it to be healthy. And that's what leads to this. Chine Song, if anyone is not familiar, write this down, go home, recognize what this is. It's a form of abdominal massage that you can do for yourself. And it is probably one of the closest, most practical things that you can do to get in touch with your own body, your own breathing, and your own spiritual path. It's working on the internal organs, working on being able to breathe correctly, and getting this vessel correct so your mind can actually open itself up, so you can free the mind. But the mind right now is focused on the fact that we're a largely unhealthy society. So most of us are dealing with problems that we didn't even know we had. Chine Song, and this guy, Mantak Chia, the guy who brought it from the mystery schools out to the public, just Google him. Mantak Chia, Chine Song. Google it. It's free. Mantak Chia. M-A-N-T-A-K. And then last name C-H-I-A. And he's written about 40 books. Incredible. But to move forward, because I have maybe 20 minutes left, definitely check this out. You know, I'm going to school for this now, and I haven't willingly gone to school my entire life. And I'm going to school for this because when you're helping the healing process of others, you're also helping the healing process of yourself. And you recognize that you will attract clients that actually represent what you're dealing with. So this is a whole school of thought that will blow your mind if you're open to it. But it's not about paying somebody to make you healthy. This is real shamanism. This is working on the energy inside your body and recognizing what's deficient and recognizing that you don't need to pay somebody. What you need to do is buckle down and actually do it yourself. At night, 10 minutes a day, if you massage your abdomen, 2 months, I guarantee your health will be in much better condition. Much better condition. Just massaging your abdomen. And it sounds very silly and simple, but the bottom line is, a lot of the times we pay no attention to our gut. And it has its own nervous system. It thinks. It knows that we're not paying attention to it. That's why it sends us illness. This guy, Milarepa. If any of you are not familiar with him, one of the greatest bodhisattvas all throughout Tibet, probably the most renowned name in Tibetan Buddhism, says that, act so that you have no cause to be ashamed of yourselves and hold fast to this rule. The reason why I show this is because he's not saying act in this way. He's not telling you how to act. What he's saying is act so that you have no cause to be ashamed and hold fast to that rule. Because there's nothing that you should be ashamed of. If you make mistakes, if you say, you know what, everyone's telling me no, but I feel that I should do this, and you go out and you fail and you make a mistake, don't be ashamed of yourself. Because like a child, you were just playing on the playground of this planet, and you were experiencing. But if you were doing it with awareness, if you were doing it with consciousness, what would happen? You would learn what works and what doesn't, and what your path is and what's veering you off of the path. So don't be ashamed of any mistakes that you make. Shame comes when we know that we shouldn't be doing something and we're still doing it. That we have experienced the fact that this is not the direction that our life should be taking, but we're doing it anyway because we don't have the willpower to bring ourselves out of it. Another thing, our internal organs, that has to do with our willpower. If you don't have the willpower to quit smoking or to quit doing something that you want, it's because your body's not focused on your will. Your body's not trying to get you to quit drinking or quit smoking. It's just trying to get you to breathe properly so you can even cognize or be cognizant of what's going on inside your body. But here's another guy. I live on the ground. Much like Milarepa, this guy who said this lived in the early part of Milarepa's life, lived much like this guy. I live on the ground. I live on the earth. I lived in Hollywood. I had all that. The Rolls Royce and the Ferrari and the pad in Beverly Hills. So I went through all that and I saw that that was a bigger prison than the one I had just gotten out of. And I really didn't want to go back to prison, you see, because prison doesn't end and begin at the gates. Prison is in the mind. Pretty interesting. But I'll show you who actually said this.
I live on the ground. I live on the earth. I lived in Hollywood, and I had all that. The Rolls Royce and the Ferrari and the pad in Beverly Hills. So I went through all that, and I seen that was a bigger prison than the one I just got out of, and I really didn't care to go back to prison. See, prison doesn't begin and end at the gate. Prison is in the mind. The reason that the girls liked me was, hey now, I'm all around you, hey now, up on your heart I can sing through you. And I play and I sing, and they say, hey man, you got soul in that music. And I said, yeah, I play a little bit, you know. I like music. And they said, man, you're really somebody. I said, oh, I am? Oh, I just got out of jail. I don't know what somebody is. In the spiritual world is where I live. I exist in places you never even dreamed of. You talk about, you know, this little physical realm you live in, guilty, and is he in sin? Well, how's your courts guilty? How many people do you think you've hung on the ventilators in the nut wards and forced medication on them? You see what I'm saying? You don't have any idea what the hell's going on. If you knew what the hell was going on in your own system, then you'd say, now I see what's creating this. Society's creating it.
People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. Probably one of the best answers I've ever heard to that. Now, I'm not sticking up for this guy because he never killed anybody. He actually never physically killed anybody. Neither did Milarepa, the Buddhist that I was telling you about before. But he's a black magician when you can get other people to do your bidding for you. Okay? When we're speaking about art and magic, he'll say many times, I've never killed anybody, I'm innocent, I've never killed anybody. However, people killed in his name in the same way that Milarepa, the greatest bodhisattva of all of Tibetan Buddhism, began his life. And to tell you what a bodhisattva is somebody who has renounced their self, renounced everything about them. They don't live for themselves anymore. They live 100% for others. 100%, which is a lot more of a, that's a lot more of a renunciation than most of us could even imagine. In one lifetime, Milarepa went from murdering people for revenge, using black magic and conventional means, murdering people, to becoming a fully awakened Buddha, an enlightened bodhisattva, in one lifetime. So it can be done. But the reason why I show this is that there is wisdom in everyone, including Charles Manson. Wise words can be spoken anywhere, anywhere. So the reason why I put him up there next to Milarepa is to show that words are just words. They can come from anywhere. It's how they resonate with you. That's art. Because the bottom line is, in all black magic, there has to be, and it's the same thing, because I believe that our leaders are involved in black magic. Advertising is black magic. It's getting your will, your way, by means of manipulation. That's black magic. I don't care who you are. That's a way of entering people's psyche and allowing them the opportunity, through your encouragement, to give you their energy. That's black magic. It's taking people's energy. That's what happens when you have a craving that cannot be taken care of, that cannot be satisfied, and you're intelligent enough to know the science behind what actual magic is. Okay? And this guy is brilliant in an intellectual way, but it's black magic. This is what it leads to. Charles Manson, he's in jail. Why? Because he wasn't high enough on the scale. He wasn't high enough in the shaking hands behind the scenes. Okay? However, this is something that we find perfectly acceptable. Not all of us here, obviously, but in a societal level, we find this to be perfectly acceptable. War. Okay? But this is also a form of black magic. You can't tell me every single one of these individuals truly believes for the causes that they're fighting for. You can't tell me that they truly believe in their heart that this is my path. This is what I was put on this planet to do. To line side by side next to all these people dressed the same exact way and march onto a field and end other people's lives. It is black magic. And that's what's happening from the top down. And the only way to recognize it, because this happens in such a subtle way that every one of us here are also under spells by ourselves, by our family, by our culture, and by others. And to free your mind to recognize this, you have to embrace the irrational. If you think any of what I'm saying or anything that any of the other speakers here says is irrational, good. You're probably on the right track there. Because the only way to open your mind is to recognize that your rational mind is what you have set up. It is the confines, not of the prison, but of the boundaries that you have set up for yourself. Because when you move beyond those boundaries, you need a lot of energy to be able to recognize that this is actually the world we live in. So just a few pieces of art before I end here. I have about 10 more minutes. I'll give 3 examples of how art changed the world. This one, The War of the Worlds, Orson Welles, you guys probably are very aware of this, but because of You know, the average psychology of people at this time listening to the radio, they had no other idea of what else could be being put on the radio other than truth. And then all of a sudden this story comes on about the War of the Worlds were being invaded, and everyone believed it. It was the right time, the right things being said, and everyone believed something that wasn't true, and it caused mass hysteria. Okay? That's one piece of art that you could say changed the world, but it really did change the way people think around the world. The reason why I put this up there, not putting it up on a pedestal or putting it anywhere else, but this is one film that I believe a lot of people will give credit for in the conspiracy realm, but I don't even think about it in that realm. I think about it as a piece of art, because this film, in a matter of 2 hours, now imagine all throughout history a piece of art, that in 2 hours you can take somebody from point A to point B and change the way that they look at the world. In 2 hours. Name other artists throughout history that have done that. I mean, we have like Da Vinci and Michelangelo, we have incredible artists, but in 2 hours, millions of people's lives were changed because of this art. And I'm not giving credence above and beyond what needs to be there, but credit needs to be given to artists that recognize that art changes the world. Art is what inspires change. You could have said everything in this film to somebody in a conversation, but it's the delivery, okay? I could sit here and recite to you the lyrics of an excellent song, but without the melody and without the delivery, it's not the same art. It's not going to move you in the same way. That is why art is of the utmost importance in our culture, and it's dwindling. Art in school is not even really art anymore, it's science. Draw a line within these borders, shape it this way, and I'm going to grade you on it. Grading on art is not art. Art is supposed to be unlimited. Embracing the infinite. That's what art truly is. And I'll give one more example. Trent Reznor. I think, you know, for the ones who are videotaping this, Trent, thank you. You changed my life. I think you're the greatest musician, you know, over the past 20, 30 years. And here's why. He didn't stop at just making records that gave people permission to feel as angry and pissed off as a teenager as they were. Because that's really what he did. Marilyn Manson didn't make people want to dress up. He gave them permission. He said, it's all right. We know that you want to explore this dark side and show other people that you're exploring that dark side. So here's permission. It's not saying, all right, I want to be like Marilyn Manson. No, people wanted to be who they were. It was permission to be who we already are. And this guy, Trent Reznor, then he went on to make an interactive art project called Year Zero, where he actually had a project that people could include themselves in. And just one example of it was he would take thumb drives with encrypted links and drop them in urinals or like in bathrooms all around the world. And people would find these and they would have codes. And they would have to decode the cipher in it to find out that it's a link. And then the link would send them to a page that was a blurry transmission that looked like it was from the future of a future race that, or no, not a future race, humanity in the future that sent the transmission back to today, warning us of the direction we're taking. That's cool. I don't care who you are, that's cool. It doesnn't have to be well-researched, it doesn't have to be based in truth. It's art. It opens your mind to the fact that truth, our type of truth, is conventional. It's temporary. Tomorrow it won't be the same truth. There's one absolute truth, and that's change. And when the mind is able to conceive of the fact that that's all the truth truly is, that's all that absolute void really is, that's when you'll start to recognize that artists are the ones that are going to be changing the world. And this is the shaman of today. So, what I would advise is for you to simply not look in a physical mirror, but proverbially look into the mirror. See what you see in yourself. Recognize how you might be keeping yourself from moving forward in your own life. How you might be shutting down your own mind to being able to grasp some of the concepts that you're going to hear this weekend. Because what you see may surprise you. You may surprise yourself and love it. You may love your reflection and want to give it a big open-mouthed French kiss and slobber all over it. It may scare the shit out of you too. Okay? But there's one thing. Whether you love it or hate it, when it's real, when it's the real thing, there's no denying it, and once you've tasted the real thing, you never want anything else. Doesn't matter how much pain it brings, doesn't matter how much pleasure it brings. The pain and the pleasure, you'll recognize that they'll come and they'll go, and it ebbs and it flows, but neither of those two things are going to stick around very long. There's one thing that sticks around. Truth. That's the one thing that sticks around. And if you can seek that truth by always being open to change, always being open to the fact that maybe you don't know everything, always being open to the fact that even though you may feel this is the right direction, take a deep breath, detox, and take a look around and recognize that we are not here to compete with one another. We're here because this is the community that we were born into. We're here for one another. We live for each other. Because at the end, there's really nothing more important than our relationships. Okay? And there's one last message that I want to say. At some point in your life, try to do it this summer, if not tonight. Appreciate your life. Just take 5 minutes, drop down on your knees and say, fuck yeah, bring it on, life. Thank you guys very much.